Hello, and a warm welcome to today's webinar, Green Recovery, Green Jobs, and Inclusive Growth in Africa. I'm Sancho, the Green Growth Policy Platform's Country Engagement Coordinator at the Green Growth Knowledge Partnership, or GGKP as it is better known, and I would like to thank you for being here with us today. Before we get started, I would like to take a brief moment to introduce GGKP, a global network of experts and organizations dedicated to providing the policy, business, and finance communities with knowledge, guidance, data, and tools to transition to an inclusive green economy. The Green Policy Platform, one of our 3 knowledge platforms, together with the Green Finance Platform and the Green Industry Platform, joined forces with the African Development Bank and the Worldwide Fund for Nature, WWF, to lay the foundation of mainstreaming natural capital in African development finance and launched the program Natural Capital for African Development Finance, so-called NC4ADF, back in 2020, with generous support from the MABA Foundation for Nature and the German Federal Ministry of Economic Development and Cooperation, BMZ, implemented by the German Agency for International Cooperation, GIZ. This webinar is the 3rd session of a webinar series on mainstreaming natural capital in Africa's post-COVID development agenda, co-organized by AfDB, GGKP, and WWF Africa, in collaboration with the African Union Commission and the UNFCCC Regional Collaboration Centre under the Natural Capital for African Development Finance Program. The webinar today will focus on sharing lessons learned and best practices on how Africa can use COVID-19 recovery to transition to a green economy and drive green job growth, and for that, how natural capital can contribute to this effort. Finally, some housekeeping. Please do submit questions and comments throughout the discussion, as it's a fantastic opportunity to engage directly with the panel. Please note that a full recording of the webinar and any presentation materials will be available on our website shortly after the broadcast. And with that, it is now my pleasure to introduce the moderator for today's event. Mr. Martin Locke is the Executive Director at the Capitals Coalition, who is our close partner under the Economics for Nature program funded by the MABA Foundation for Nature. The Capitals Coalition promotes a collaboration between leading organizations in accounting and standards, multi-stakeholder groups, finance, business, government, science, and civil society to transform the way decisions are made by including the value provided by nature, people, and society. With more than 25 years of experience as a policymaker for the Netherlands government, Martin has worked in several policy domains, including environmental policy, international nature policy, and green growth policy. He's a co-author of several national policy documents and has led public-private collaboration actions on natural capital in the Netherlands from 2014. In 2018, he initiated and led the Global Government Dialogue on Natural Capital. Without further ado, I would like to invite our moderator, Martin, to start us off. Over to you, Martin.
Thank you very much, Sun, for this introduction, and a very welcome also from my side to all of the audience, people in the audience, as well as the speakers. I think we have a wonderful program ahead of us. It's the 3rd webinar GGKP is organizing around green growth and COVID recovery in Africa. The first webinar focused on green growth action plans in Africa through natural capital approaches and how in Africa people use natural capital approaches to inform COVID-19 recovery plans. Then the second webinar focused more on mobilizing resources for a green and inclusive recovery. And now this 3rd webinar looks at green jobs and inclusive growth. And I think by moving towards green jobs, the focus of this webinar gets even more close than in the previous two webinars, to people, to the hearts of people, and what really matters on the ground in Africa as well as in other continents. But let's focus on Africa now. So the this session that we are having today is, I think, a very interesting one, because it brings together so many different angles around a COVID recovery, natural capital accounting, and green growth. We have speakers from the African Development Bank, WWF, World Wildlife Fund, the International Labour Organization, the Global Green Growth Institute, and Green Girls Organization. And I'm really looking forward to what all these experts and these different angles will bring to this this discussion. So just to introduce the agenda briefly, we are going to explore how Africa can leverage its natural capital to drive green recovery with a specific focus on job growth. We also are going to set out which specific reforms are needed to foster green employment opportunities. And we are going to identify barriers which are remaining to implement a green economy and to create the green jobs that are necessary. And last but not least, and hopefully also very specifically, we are going to highlight examples and experience that can be leveraged in accelerating actions across the continent. So without further ado, I would like to invite Gareth Phillips, the Climate and Environmental Finance Manager from AfDB, to give us a couple of opening remarks on his views on how to activate green recovery actions through the promotion of green jobs. Gareth, the floor is yours.
Right, well, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. As Martin has said, my name is Gareth Phillips, and I'm the Manager of Climate and Environmental Finance at the African Development Bank. And it's my pleasure to join you on this webinar and make some opening remarks about green jobs and their contributions towards a low carbon and climate resilient future for the African continent. So I'm sure that most of you are familiar with the concept of climate justice and how Africa is responsible for about 4% of cumulative global emissions, and yet is the continent that will suffer most from the impacts of climate change. Losses arising from climate change are likely to exceed $50 billion a year by 2040, and yet out of over $600 billion of climate finance that was committed in 2020, only about 3% of that came to sub-Saharan Africa. So there's a very big imbalance in the need and the suffering and where the money is going. Now, today's climate emergency will force countries to change their economic models towards more sustainable forms of production. For example, fossil fuel subsidies need to be phased out and opportunities taken to create grid and off-grid renewable energy. Provision of access to clean and affordable energy has the potential to create large numbers of direct and indirect green jobs. COVID-19 presents an opportunity to build back better, and learning from the impact that COVID-19 had on micro, small and medium enterprises and the informal sector is a real opportunity for African countries. Governments need to work to develop policies on skills development and roadmaps for employment and labour, which will concentrate on the promotion of green jobs. This is one of the major conclusions of the Green Jobs report that was recently published by the African Development Bank and UN Women. The bank is at the forefront of the creation of green jobs. Our current 10-year strategy and the new 10-year strategy, which is currently being drafted, both recognize the importance of green growth for the African continent. And the bank is implementing a number of programs that will respond to the urgent need as expressed in countries' nationally determined contributions and the Sustainable Development Goals. Some of the bank's flagship programs include Youth Adapt and our program for empowering youth for entrepreneurship and job creation under the African Adaptation Acceleration Program. The Youth Adapt initiative is aligned with the bank's Job for Youth in Africa strategy, which aims to boost creation of jobs for youth on the continent by offering more opportunities to young women and men in its operations, creating 25 million jobs for young people and positively impacting 50 million others by 2025. Whilst this is not a specific initiative focusing on green jobs, many of those jobs will be green and will make a significant contribution. Under the African Adaptation Acceleration Programme, the bank aims to support 10,000 micro, small and medium enterprises with capitalisation grants and training to create 1 million jobs for youth in the climate change and adaptation space, and these will be green jobs. For the purposes of monitoring and reporting green jobs, the bank has developed a model to estimate the gross direct and indirect jobs created during project implementation. The model captures jobs created in all sectors, including agriculture, energy, finance, transport, social, environment, and climate change. And the bank is also working on a green jobs tracking tool to track and monitor green jobs from the bank portfolio and develop relevant indicators that track green jobs, especially those relating to and not limited to climate action, environment, circular economy, and biodiversity. The green jobs tracking tool will enable the bank to track its goal of creating jobs at a more granular level by disaggregating the jobs created by impacts on the environment. This in turn will help the bank report to donors and report on the impacts that we are having, which has a positive feedback on the ability to mobilize additional financial resources. Now, the focus of today's event is on the role of green jobs and helping Africa transition to a low carbon, climate resilient future. And I wanted to highlight what the bank is doing to mobilize climate finance to help generate green jobs in the key sectors of renewable energy, biodiversity and nature-based solutions, climate resilient agriculture, and green resilient cities. Let me start by reflecting on what we think constitutes a green job. So these are jobs that contribute to low carbon and climate resilient future for the continent. So they do not lock in fossil fuels, and they are designed to be resilient to both physical and policy-based changes that may take place as a result of climate change. Green jobs need to be available to all sectors of society, including women and youth, who are frequently excluded from employment opportunities. In the African context, where as many as 80 to 90% of jobs are provided by small and medium enterprises, green jobs should ideally be recognized and formalized with contracts and conditions of employment. Now, climate finance can play a key role in helping to develop green jobs by providing financial resources to support investments and particularly and activities that focus upon adaptation to climate change and activities where revenue streams are weak or absent and where entrepreneurs and business opportunities, where entrepreneurs and business operators are unable to mobilize debt. In a recent study, NEPAD estimated there were 44 million micro, small, and medium enterprises in sub-Saharan Africa, and the vast majority of these are unbankable. In other words, that means they don't have any assets or collateral with which to raise debt. So they have no ability to borrow money to invest into their activities. Now, even if a fraction of those entities wish to access climate finance to help create green jobs, it means tens or even hundreds of thousands of entities to be supported. And we need to develop and implement initiatives that provide support to those kinds of institutions. However, green jobs aren't necessarily small-scale initiatives. Africa can also develop green jobs in the industrial sector by making a conscious decision to leapfrog a fossil-fueled industrialization pathway. And because of its abundant renewable energy resources, Africa has the potential to implement pathways that skip or jump the fossil-fueled route. And in particular, Africa has the potential to develop green hydrogen, which can act as a carbon-neutral feedstock for the hard-to-abate industrial sectors, including cement, steel, glass, and the chemical sector. With the right policies and access to climate finance, Africa could become a producer of low or zero carbon commodities, which will be in very high demand in the global north. And actually, I think it's quite interesting to propose that heavy industry jobs working, for example, in the chemical sector or the cement and steel sector could be green jobs. And I think that is a tremendous opportunity that Africa has ahead of many other countries which don't have the potential to generate green hydrogen or already have locked in industries that are locked into using fossil fuels. Now, renewable energy can have a huge impact on green jobs simply because it can provide clean and affordable energy for productive use. This can enable green job opportunities from beauty salons through small-scale agricultural processing to the large-scale investments that I mentioned. Renewable energy is also intimately linked to the concept of just transition, particularly through the development of mini-grid and off-grid renewable energy systems. And coupled with energy-efficient devices, these systems are a real opportunity for the creation of green jobs. Nature-based solutions such as land restoration, water management, and biodiversity-based initiatives help to make African economies resilient to shocks. After all, biodiversity is nature's response to change, and it is essential that for future generations, we protect existing resources of biodiversity. It can be difficult to generate adequate financial returns from these activities, especially, for example, where traditional crop varieties and livestock are competing with improved and higher yielding varieties. And this is an area where climate adaptation finance could be applied to facilitate long-term adaptation to climate change. Agriculture provides huge amount of huge proportion of labor for a huge proportion of Africa's population and a disproportionate number of women. Supporting climate resilient agriculture takes multiple indicators for green jobs. Technology can also play a big role through, for example, the provision of climate resilient agriculture and heat and drought adapted varieties of seed, climate information systems that warn of impending floods and droughts, and agricultural processing technologies that add value to produce and reduce food loss with obvious food security benefits. And finally, green and resilient cities create major opportunities for green jobs, particularly when combined with access to renewable energy. Well-designed urban spaces with high population densities can facilitate vastly improved living conditions because they can support the cost of investing in clean and efficient infrastructure. These spaces in turn become attractive to residents and businesses, creating further demand for clean services. The African Development Bank has multiple initiatives addressing many of these topics. For example, a new fund has recently been created to support small and medium enterprises in the agricultural sector with support from the Government of Canada. In partnership with the Global Centre for Adaptation, the African Development Bank launched the African Adaptation Acceleration Programme with 4 pillars addressing agricultural technologies, resilient infrastructures, job for youth, and development of further financial initiative to raise climate finance. The AAAP will double adaptation finance in Africa to $25 billion by 2025. The bank's Desert to Power initiatives in the G5 Sahel countries seeks to install 10 gigawatts of renewable energy and provide clean and affordable energy to 250 million people with major opportunities for green banks. And the bank's program to transform African agricultural technologies is providing climate resilient solutions to millions of farmers. These are activities that are all part of the bank's commitment to mobilize $25 billion of climate finance by 2025, spread across adaptation and mitigation activities. And in the process, the bank will ensure that all projects are screened for climate design, which means that there will be an increased focus on the development of green jobs. So despite the fact that the world is facing a major challenge in the form of climate change, there is cause to be optimistic about the opportunities that can be created through the provision of climate finance and particularly renewable energy with a focus on creating green jobs. Green jobs can help put Africa onto a pathway to low carbon and climate resilient future, which will bring long-term sustainable improvements to the quality of life for millions and millions of African people. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Garrett. That's quite a good way to start the discussions on this panel. You've shared a number of examples where the African Development Bank is already working to support green job opportunities. It would be great to dive into that a little bit further on when you say the right policies and access to finance is needed. What are the right policies and which policies do you think are really needed to take away the barriers for further growth of the green jobs in Africa? But let's pause that for the discussions a little bit later in the program. First, I would like to invite Stefan Cornelius to the online floor to give a keynote speech on shaping the future of green jobs in Africa. Stefan is the Deputy Global Leader of Climate and Energy from the World Wildlife Fund. And as always, I'm expecting an inspiring story from WWF. Stefan, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Martin, and thanks to the organisers for your kind invitation to speak at this important webinar. And I'm pleased to be here on behalf of WWF Climate and Energy Practice. So humankind faces a triple challenge over the next 30 years. How do we achieve sustainable development, including feeding a growing population, while staying on track to keep global warming below 1.5 degrees to avoid the worst climate risks? And how do we do that while reversing biodiversity loss? And the graphic you see sort of shows some of the interactions between climate change, people and nature. Now that sort of triple challenge framing, they don't use these words, but the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, recognized that climate, nature and people are intertwined. And they did this in the framing of the Working Group 2 report. And this is the report of theirs that focuses on impacts, adaptation and vulnerability. And that's the contribution to the 6th assessment report. So, I mean, the triple challenge is hard enough, but in the last few years, we've been hit by more shocks. The big lesson from COVID-19 and Ukraine crisis is that what affects one country, one region, it can affect us all. The COVID-19 pandemic led to lockdowns, it led to loss of lives and livelihoods and stagnating economies around the world. And it has cost over 30 million jobs in Africa, driven up poverty and increased debt pressures. And as Gareth said in his opening talk, there's now an opportunity to build back better. And then we have Putin's invasion of Ukraine that has reduced food security and has driven up energy prices across the globe. So countries around the world, including those in Africa, find themselves at a critical juncture as they must choose a path to recover from the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. And as we recover, we need to address many issues simultaneously. We will need to prioritize green investments. I agree with Gareth on that, and those that back the sustainable use of resources, renewable energy and energy efficiency and nature-based solutions. And moving to a green economy protects natural capital. And so, by natural capital, this comprises land, ecosystems, living resources and non-renewable resources. And this forms the predominant wealth of low-income countries and the income from which can be used to develop human capital. So it's the state of knowledge and skills of the population, and physical capital, such as infrastructure. And typically the dependence on natural capital declines as countries develop into middle and high income countries, which is accompanied by an increase in physical and human capital. Could you switch to the next slide, please, Sam? There's a policy brief from June 2022 by WWF and the ECAS Commission, Building Sustainable Future for Central Africa in a post-COVID world, the role of natural capital. This report explores pathways based on countries' natural capital assets to build back their economies by encouraging diversification, for instance. And it argues that nurturing the region's ecological capital will be key to the future development, in this case, of the Central African states. A second WWF report, and this time with BCG from June 2021, looks at building forward better towards a carbon neutral equitable and nature positive East Africa. And this one looks at opportunities within the green space, and especially at ecotourism, at food and at energy. And this report highlighted that green and blue investments, so low carbon, resource efficient and socially inclusive, have often been seen as driven by pure environmental perspective. However, the report shows that the impact goes much beyond the environment, with direct benefits to East African economies and people, because nature is already intricately at the center of East African economies, livelihoods and well-being. And the analysis estimates that $15 billion could be added to the overall East African community GDP, with direct improvements to health and livelihoods of 22 million people, including 7 million new jobs created across sustainable agriculture, fisheries, and aquaculture, and wildlife-based tourism and renewable energy by 2030. So in East Africa, going green could prevent hunger for 13 million people currently at risk through climate smart practices to improve agricultural productivity, and save 2.5 million people from risk of displacement due to climate-induced natural disasters, such as droughts and floods. In 2020, if you go to the next slide, please, Son. In 2020, WWF and the International Labour Organization, the ILO, and we have a colleague on the panel today, published another report, Nature Hires, How Nature-Based Solutions Can Power a Green Jobs Recovery. While this report has a global outlook rather than, a solely African focus, the recommendations are still valid, and it highlights the potential of nature-based solutions to provide job-intense recovery while having a multiplier effect in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. And it's not just any jobs, but sort of decent, productive work that delivers a fair income and security in the workplace. However, these jobs and the hundreds of millions of others that fuel economies around the world cannot be at the expense of nature and the living planet on which we depend. Over half the world's GDP, the equivalent to $44 trillion is moderately or highly dependent on nature, and globally 1.2 billion jobs rely directly on ecosystem services. So these factors send a critical message that we must mend our broken relationship with nature, as without a healthy planet, there can be no healthy economies. You can stop the screen share, Son, please. The economic and development trajectories that the countries decide today will have an impact on their ecological future, and consequently the longer term poverty reduction and economic development potential. There is therefore a strong need for decision makers to ensure that their environmental and development goals are adequately aligned, especially as human activities near unregulated and sensitive ecosystems have been identified as a major threat to the ecological future. Beg your pardon. It will be tough, but the path to build a sustainable future must balance the immediate development and economic needs with the longer term sustainable development potential as Africa and the rest of the world emerges from the COVID-19 pandemic and begins to recover. So, what affects one country, one region affects us all. And this is true of the relationship between people and nature. What we do to nature, we do to ourselves. And although the pandemic undoubtedly presents one of the most significant challenges to humanity since the Second World War, our anticipated recovery has opened a unique window of opportunity. This opportunity, if we have the willingness and the courage to seize it, may serve as a launchpad towards building a future that is green and equitable, and that drives resilience and health in the face of future pandemic threats, and is both nature positive and climate neutral. So, Martin, thank you for your kind invitation to present today, and I look forward to hearing the rest of the webinar.
Well, thank you very much, Stefan, for this overview. And WWF really, with all your partners, you published a suite of very interesting reports that could be of help to create a COVID-19 recovery that is not only good for the economy, but also for nature and people. So the three elements that you started your presentation with. And something you mentioned towards the end around that decision makers need to have all the relevant information on the environment as well as on the economy in order to come to the right decisions. I think that really goes to the heart too. Probably another topic we can have further discussions on later in this meeting. But now I would like to start the panel discussion, and I will invite one by one the 4 panelists. So let's start with Seynabou Diouf from Senegal, the International Labour Organization in Dakar, the national coordinator of PAGE in Senegal. Seynabou, can you please share your reflections on the topic of today, and also of the keynote speech and the opening remarks given by Stefan and Garrett? Seynabou, the floor is yours.
Merci beaucoup. Tout d'abord, je voudrais remercier les organisateurs d'avoir eu cette initiative, mais aussi d'y avoir associé l'Organisation internationale du travail pour nous donner l'opportunité de parler de ce que nous faisons dans le cadre de notre programme sur les emplois verts. Donc, particulièrement en ce qui concerne la relance verte, le programme pour les emplois verts de l'OIT a mis en place une panoplie d'outils de recherche, des projets et des programmes de coopération au développement, des programmes de renforcement de capacité et donc l'appui à des stratégies de la conception et la mise en œuvre de stratégies de développement durable. Et particulièrement dans ce cadre-là, le programme PAGE que je coordonne, PAGE, c'est le partenariat pour l'action en faveur de l'économie verte, qui est un programme conjoint du système des Nations Unies, mis en œuvre par le PNUE, le PNUD, l'ONUDU, l'UNUTAR et l'OIT. Et donc, dans le cadre de ce programme PAGE, l'OIT a eu à mettre en œuvre un programme de relance verte au Burkina Faso, au Ghana, au Sénégal et en Afrique du Sud. Et dans le cadre de ce programme de relance verte, il a été offert aux pays dans lesquels l'OIT a intervenu. Comme j'ai dit tout à l'heure, la panoplie d'outils dont dispose le programme de relance verte. Notamment, je vais citer parmi ces outils-là, l'outil d'analyse situationnelle rapide. C'est un outil qui a permis de faire rapidement des études pour donner la situation sur l'impact de la pandémie de la COVID-19 sur les économies nationales et l'impact des stratégies de relance verte aussi sur le marché de l'emploi. Donc, en général, sur l'économie verte. Donc, dans ce cadre-là aussi, toujours dans le cadre de l'appui au pays pour la relance verte, nous avons utilisé un outil que nous appelons le Green Job Assessment Model. C'est un outil qui permet donc de modéliser de façon quantitative l'impact des investissements pour la relance verte sur la croissance et l'emploi. Donc, à côté de l'outil sur l'analyse situationnelle rapide, ce sont des outils complémentaires en fait. Et donc, parallèlement à l'appui à l'implémentation de ces outils-là, nous avons aussi mis à la disposition des pays un pool d'éminents experts au niveau mondial pour leur fournir des conseils sur les politiques ciblées et à la demande. Donc, à côté du programme PAGE, nous avons aussi au niveau de l'OIT mis en place un programme qu'on appelle la dimension sociale de la transition écologique. Et ce programme découle de l'initiative Action climatique pour l'emploi qui a été lancée par le secrétariat des Nations Unies en compagnie avec le directeur général de l'OIT lors de la COP26. Et donc, cette initiative Action climatique pour l'emploi offre aux pays des services, des outils pour évaluer un peu toujours l'impact de l'investissement dans les politiques de relance économique, mais surtout l'impact sur l'emploi, mais aussi l'impact sur l'environnement. C'est-à-dire en tenant compte des engagements des pays dans le cadre des contributions déterminées au niveau national, la mise en œuvre de ces engagements-là va avoir des répercussions aussi bien sur l'emploi que sur l'environnement et l'économie. Et donc, à travers le programme sur la dimension sociale de la transition écologique, nous avons développé une approche pilote au niveau du Sénégal, du Nigeria et de la Côte d'Ivoire, qui a commencé par faire une analyse de la situation rapide. Et donc, avec l'outil du Green Job Assessment Model, qui est en train de compiler les données pour étudier un peu l'impact de ces politiques de CDN sur le marché de l'emploi. À côté de ça aussi, nous avons un programme d'investissement à haute intensité de main-d'œuvre, et donc qui encourage un peu l'adoption de politiques à haute intensité de main-d'œuvre dans la planification, la mise en œuvre et l'entretien des infrastructures, surtout les infrastructures environnementales. Donc, à côté de ça, nous avons produit, je pense qu'il y a mon prédécesseur qui en a parlé tout à l'heure, nous avons produit beaucoup de documents, d'études sous forme que nous avons publiés sous forme de policy brief pour informer justement sur l'évolution de la pandémie et de son impact sur le monde du travail. Et donc, de ces activités-là, ce que nous retenons, ce que nous avons retenu vraiment, c'est que nous avons constaté qu'avec la pandémie de la COVID-19, beaucoup d'innovations, en tout cas, ont été développées par les jeunes, que ce soit des hommes et des femmes dans les pays où nous sommes intervenus, surtout dans le domaine de l'économie circulaire et des applications numériques. Donc, ça veut dire qu'il y a eu une résilience face à cette pandémie qui a été développée au sein des pays. Mais la plus grande leçon que nous avons apprise à travers nos interventions, c'est que le dialogue social est nécessaire pour que cette relance-là puisse être durable. Et quand je parle de dialogue social, je peux parler de l'engagement de toutes les parties prenantes, que ce soit le gouvernement, les organisations d'employeurs et les organisations de travailleurs, pour que collectivement, ensemble, qu'on puisse mettre en place des stratégies et des politiques donc, de relance verte. Parce que la pandémie a fini encore de nous confirmer que ce sont les couches les plus vulnérables qui sont les plus impactées en période de crise. Et donc, il faudrait que les États mettent en place des stratégies de protection sociale, et ça, c'est de concert avec le monde du travail, pour faire en sorte que les travailleurs et leurs familles soient préservés de ces crises-là. Donc, nous avons au niveau de l'OIT développé des lignes directrices pour cette transition écologique juste là. Et nous avons aussi les normes internationales du travail, un certain nombre de recommandations, en tout cas, en particulier la recommandation 205 sur l'emploi et le travail décent au service de la paix et de la résilience, qui peuvent être des outils à mettre en profit pour accompagner ce programme de relance verte-là. Voilà, comme on n'a pas beaucoup de temps, je ne voudrais pas vraiment m'appesantir sur aller dans certains détails, mais je reste ouverte aux questions, éventuellement pour approfondir certains points. Merci beaucoup de votre attention.
Thank you, Seinabu, for sharing these experiences from ILO. And it's good to see how you're providing practical tools as well as a pool of advisors to the governments in your region. And I especially also liked the major lesson that you shared, how important it is to have a social dialogue and to collaborate, to create a good collaboration between governments, the business community, finance, because only together COVID recovery will be achieved. I think that's certainly a lesson we probably need to further discuss later on in the webinar. For now, I would like to invite Salimata Soumare, Senior Natural Resources Governance Officer at AfDB, and to share experiences on advancing the gender agenda through promoting women's green job for green recovery. Salimata, the floor is yours. And to the audience, please be aware you can provide your questions in the Q&A box, and we will pick them up later in the process. Salimata.
Thank you so much for giving me the floor, and good afternoon, good morning to everyone. My name is Salimata, and I work at the African Natural Resource Management and Investment Center of the African Development Bank as a Senior Natural Resource Governance Officer. I am thrilled to be part today to this panel and to join fellow speakers in discussing the topic of advancing gender agenda through promoting women's green job for green recovery in Africa. Okay, so we have the report today. I will share about the report, Green Job for Women in Africa, which was jointly published by UN Women and the African Development Bank, as Gareth, my colleague, mentioned earlier in this opening speech. It was published in December 2021. And the study looked at the gender dimension of transition to green economy with a focus on green jobs. The report identified opportunities for women's participation in green jobs in key sectors driving growth in the African economy. It also identified obstacles that women encounter to access those jobs, and also identify the key recommendation and reform to ensure that women can access opportunities on green jobs as part of green economy transition strategy in the region in the next decade. So first of all, let me share with you some of the key messages from that report. First message, transition to green economy will be a major trend shaping socio-economic outcome in the next 50 years across the globe. Changes in the structure of the economy, production process, all this will require new jobs or adaptation to existing one, and a number of economic opportunities are expected to be created as a result. Second message, in spite of all the attention that the green economy transition is attracting in policy cycle, its potential gender impact has been subject of little analysis. So questions such as how much of new green jobs will be accessible to women, or what type of green jobs are likely to be seized by women and men, are worth asking now. And the answer of such question will define the outcome of the transition and whether it is fair or equitable or biased against women and girls. A third message also comes from that report. So the focus on green job for women represents an intersection of the concern of gender advocates who want to influence post-COVID recovery in the short term and transition to green economy in the medium to long term, and green economy experts and policymakers who seek a better understanding of the gender dimension of green economy and how to develop fair and gender responsive green economy policy in the region. Last message, a fourth one, will be the COVID context. So a focus on post-COVID recovery in Africa. The study takes place in a time where Africa and the world, as we know, are recovering from a historic pandemic. And there is a consensus on the fact that recovery cannot take place at the expense of environmental or social outcome. There is also a reformist drive as part of post-COVID-19 recovery strategy, which is worth implementation from a gender and environmental point of view. So I would like to discuss the main funding slide. Yeah, I'm sharing now the key findings of and conclusion of the report. But after this slide, you will see and will agree with me that the question raised in the panel, the question is, I would say, is not about how promoting gender in green job can unlock opportunity for green recovery, but rather from this result we already have, rather how to make the green recovery agenda more inclusive to make sure that it benefits men to women. You will also take note that the key question raised in the report was how do we leverage opportunities brought about by the green transition to improve gender equality and women empowerment. Let's see this finding. First, women are well positioned in some sector of in some of the sector where green job will be created. A range of sector will be created. We've created green job in Africa with energy, construction, agriculture, creating a largest number. Women currently hold many jobs in agriculture, yes. Forests and tourism, where green job growth is also expected in the region, are also important area of female employment. Women are underrepresented and in key sector of the green economy that will offer the best green jobs. Those sectors most likely to create higher-end green jobs include energy, especially wind and solar, transportation, construction. Women are overrepresented in agriculture, waste management, and certain area of renewable energy, biomass, and which are likely to create mostly low-end job. However, we do have a positive development, is that even in sectors where women are not well represented, they are finding niches. A small woman-led business in indirect job in green construction, renovation, energy efficiency, or renewable energy. Two more findings or key conclusion is that women face several barriers that may limit their full access to green job in the coming years. Some of these barriers are sector-specific, such as social norm that deem construction jobs inappropriate for women. Also permeate other sector. We have some barrier to access land, finance and technology, gender segregation in education system, in labor market, so and so. Another conclusion of this report, of the Green Job Report, is that the transition to green economy offer a unique opportunity to reduce gender inequality in the labor market in Africa through a number of avenues, including we have a changing perception about what are acceptable male or female jobs, eroding strong pattern of horizontal gender segregation in labor market, meaning that many of the job in the green economy will be in new occupation, not yet socially assigned to men or women. Thus, there are opportunities for women to claim those new jobs, engineer, architect, driver of green buses, I mean, in different, many different fields. And another avenue is assigning economic value to women's unpaid work on behalf of the environment. Women across Africa play a critical role as manager of natural resources and contributing to the environmental sustainability and resilience of their community. This work is often unpaid and done in a voluntary basis. So new green economic instruments such as carbon credit, payment for environmental services scheme in tourism, forestry, and other sector can really change this by assigning economic value to women unpaid work. Next slide. Through this report, we see that we already have mapped the different most of opportunities, I would say. We see that women are in green recovery economic already. We have women-led businesses in solar, in renewable energy, in recycling, not to mention agriculture, forestry. We all agree that recovery will mostly rest on creating new opportunities for job creation, entrepreneurship, and self-employment, particularly for women and youth. But greater work is needed. My fellow, my colleague already talked about that. We need to do more to support women cooperative, economic group, and SMEs that will contribute to the green economy. I heard about the right policy from Garrett, climate access, all that. But the report also present a number of specific measures and policy. Since right policy is needed for policymakers and advocates that could make a significant contribution in leveraging women's opportunity in green jobs. There are 3 categories of those recommendations. First of the recommendation is a number of action focus on getting women ready for the green economy. That will be through education, skills, capacity building, and institutional support to women-led business. Reducing horizontal segregation in the labor market to allow women access to all green jobs on equal terms with men will require a combination of education policy, strong female role model, and support mechanism for women in male-dominated sectors. A second type of policy however, this may not be enough. We are adding a second type of policy. Action focused on leveling the playing field for a gender-responsive green economy are also required. Addressing social norm and improving the enabling environment for women's participation in the green economy is crucial. This requires overcoming bias and expectation around the distribution of unpaid care work, as well as overturning laws that particularly limit women's access to resources and means to undertake economic activities. Those type 1 and 2 of policy that they just already mentioned are critical, but still may lead to a scenario in which women's participation in green job vis-a-vis men takes a long time to happen. That is why a third type of policy focus on accelerating action for a gender-responsive green economy in several areas is also necessary, like affirmative action to integrate gender target and objective into existing and new economic policy instrument can also accelerate women access to green jobs. That is why by leveraging existing green economy policy instrument, the government have at their disposal a number of economic instrument to foster this transition toward green economy. It could also happen by promoting affirmative green and sustainable public procurement activity initiatives like green climate, green bonds. Overall, we will say like climate finance that was well developed also by Garrett. And lastly, we need a vision for maybe that's maybe the next slide and the last one almost. Which vision do we need for a gender transformative green economy transition? To create the condition for women and girls to live to a higher productivity green jobs, we need to higher productivity green jobs, skipping the low claim from one low productive job to one is slightly better. Another solution, this require an ambition policy agenda. Currently, there are critical policy gaps for this lift proof to happen. For example, policy on skill development, which concentrate the majority of policy intervention to promote green jobs, will not be enough for women and girls to benefit from green economy opportunity and access a fair share of the jobs to be created. And lastly, what we need is to act now, while there is still time to prevent the green transition from being severely biased against women and girls. Government and advocate can take immediate advantage of the reformist drive of COVID-19 recovery or piggyback on other relevant national and regional policy process to promote long-term and far-reaching structural changes. Last, the way forward, improving access to green job must begin with country-level conversation in the context of national process of green economy transition. This required country-level analysis, data collection, and sometimes generation of data to find specific solutions that fit each country green economic transition strategy, specific to post-COVID-19 fiscal reality and gender dynamic in national labor market. We will also need the formulation of national green job strategy currently underway in a number of countries in the region present, and this national strategy present an opportunity to conceptualize and apply some of the high-level recommendations of this report. And of course, we will need women to be at the table of those discussions. And yes, thank you. Thank you for your attention, and thank you for having me and inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This was a wonderful presentation, and I really liked the policy recommendations at the end of your presentation, Salimata, getting women ready, leveling the playing field, and developing gender responsive green transition approaches. Really, really inspiring to hear all of those. So the next speaker is Monique Nutumia, the youth leader and founder of the Green Girls organization. So Monique, please come to the floor and share your ideas about green jobs and entrepreneurship, especially for green girls, I would think. But the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be invited to this amazing webinar. Monique Tumgia is the founder of the Green Girls organization, and I hope everybody can hear me clearly.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much for your question, Martin. The previous panelists have been amazing in their presentations, and just a brief summary on what the Green Girls organization has been doing on the African continent, promoting green entrepreneurship, promoting access to clean and affordable energy to women and girls on the African continent. We are the only Pan-African social enterprise that is actually using modern technologies, specifically artificial intelligence, to identify the specific clean energy problems that women and girls face in African villages. And then with the data that we collect, we are able to provide the specific clean energy solutions in terms of biogas installations that will use waste, organic waste found in these villages, to make available to this for these women clean cooking fuel. So they no longer have to use firewood for cooking. Trees are no longer cut down, for firewood. So deforestation is on an all-time low. And then for the solar part, we carry out solar installations that provide electricity, precisely lighting in these villages. So that's the first part of what we are doing. Now, our innovative business model for the past 7 years is the fact that we do not only use, grants to get into these communities and provide access to clean energy for these women and girls, but we actually the definition of what we call sustainability, in the sense that we, for the biogas part, when you construct biodigesters, right, you have access to an agricultural byproduct called slurry or organic fertilizer. So we are training these women on how to first maintain their biodigesters so that they are able to benefit for a duration of a minimum of 5 years of continuously having access to clean cooking fuel, that's the biogas. Then we are also training them on how to collect and package this organic fertilizer. And then we create markets for them to sell this organic fertilizer to people who grow natural flowers, those who are into organic farming, keeping in mind that organic produce costs 3 to 5 times more when you want to export, and it's healthier and it's organic. Now for the solar part, we are training the women on how to assemble solar lamps. We create markets for them to sell these lamps, and then be it for the packaged organic fertilizer or for the solar lamps that we're training the women how to assemble, that's equipping them with what we call eco-entrepreneurial skills, right? So we're creating markets for them to sell these products. They keep 70% of the revenue, and then we keep 30% of the revenue. The 30% revenue that we keep is helps us run administrative costs, follow up with focal points in the various villages, so that we do not get into this vicious cycle of depending solely on grants. Now, the proceeds, 70% proceeds, is actually being managed by a microfinance institution, because microfinance institutions are a huge lever for development when you want to promote development from a grassroots level. It's always good to see all the policies developed and all the presentations, but we have to bear in mind that there is a disconnect between the reality on the ground and the actual policies. And that's where organizations like us always use platforms like these and whatever opportunity we have to let the stakeholders and the international organizations that draft and develop all these budgets to fund green growth and entrepreneurship, to let them know that at a grassroots level, the reality is right now in an African community, trees are being cut to be used for firewood. And that's because that is all they know. They don't know anything about the SDGs. They don't know anything about green growth and recovery. It is until we come that they actually know that the amount of organic waste that they generate is actually wealth, and they can leverage on that with our technology and our trainings to be able to benefit, from this waste. Another thing we have to keep in mind is the fact that microfinance institutions are a great lever for development, and they are properly structured, especially on the African continent, to be able to address issues of what we call savings groups, because you definitely be asking yourself, so how are these women able to, control the funds, the money they are able to earn? That's where the microfinance institutions come into place, because they put these women into cooperatives or savings groups, as you call it. They're able to distribute the funds within them. They are able to follow up on how they should spend the money, knowing very well that from a surface level, what you're seeing is, oh, we are carrying out solar installations, we're carrying out biogas installations, but it's other minor problems or really major problems that you really will not see at the first glance that we are solving. It's education that is being advocated for the girl child, knowing very well that in an African village, the girl child is the one who carries out all the household chores. It is the fact that we've had communities whereby sexual harassment has been at an all-time low, because a girl had to go out and look for firewood, and in the process of that, she's sexually assaulted. These are the realities, and it is always our place, or my place, whatever platform I have, to let institutions know that the policies are great. The grants is always good to have this grant, but let us not fall into the trap of dictating solutions instead of making available the specific solutions. And we have been able to address that for the past 7 years by using artificial intelligence. The next question usually is, Africa doesn't have any data. So how are you people able to leverage on data to be able to provide the specific clean energy solutions? Now, in the beginning, what we did was almost every African country, for the African countries that we've worked in, because our solution is replicable and scalable. So we can work in any African country and adapt our solutions to any African rural community. It's been a case with, we've worked in Cameroon, Central African Republic, DRC Congo. COVID put a pause on our activities, but we'll be rolling out into 8 other African countries. So most African countries have a national statistics agency. So it's basic information that they have, you know, the number of people, number of regions, communes, you name it. And then when we take that data, we are able to, you know, break down, depending on the structure of the country. For example, a case like Cameroon, we have, you know, we'll go at a national level, then at a regional level, you know, meeting with the governors to know information that they have. Then from a governor's level to the mayor's level, then the chiefs. Because if we don't have the blessings of, you know, the local rulers, we won't be able to get into these communities and actually impact. And with this, you know, data, like raw firsthand information we're able to collect, we're able to develop an innovative algorithm. And this algorithm was able to make us understand that no two African communities are the same. That's why for over 7 years, it's been 3,100 biogas installations that we've constructed, and over 1,500 solar installations we've been able to install. Because some African countries, for example, the northern part of Cameroon, where we've worked, we didn't carry out any biogas installations because this is a region that experiences the dry season, or, you know, harsh desert, arid kind of conditions almost all year round. So it doesn't make sense. We realized with the algorithm that it did not make sense constructing biodigesters, even though they are cattle rearers and they have a good amount of cattle waste that we can use. But it made more sense leveraging on the power, harnessing the power of the sun that they have almost all year round, if not all year round, because the northern regions of Cameroon are usually prone to droughts and lack of access to water. So that's what we have been doing, and we believe that change must not always be, you know, huge, you know, with a huge amount. If you start from a grassroots level and you make use of institutions that are already in place, because the thing in Africa is we have institutions in place. Are the institutions usually well developed and structured? No. That is why we always say no two communities are the same. No two local institutions are the same. We get into an institution, we try and see what they have in place, and then we make do with what they have in place. We work with it, because it's important for these people to know that we are not coming to impose. We are first of all coming to understand what has been in place. Who are we? How long are we going to be in your community? How do you run? You're the local ruler. How do you run? You know, how do you run your village? How do you, you know, go through your daily activities? So when you work with the people, they are much more receptive. You know, they will come for the trainings. The focal points are able to relate to us. Oh, this biodigester has been working. This one is not really working. This women's group, this is what these women have been able to do, or this one is able to do with the money that she earns. So, and the impact has been enormous. It's been 3 African countries we've impacted. It's been over 4,500 women and girls. It's been 3,500 what we call micro sustainable jobs we've been able to create. And you will look at it and you will not believe how much of a change we are actually, you know, implementing and impacting on the continent. Because just imagine you get into a community, it's all dark, and when you're living, there is light. When you're living, the women are using clean cooking for. When you're living, they earn an income. So it's an innovative, holistic approach that I usually do not shy away from, you know, sharing and looking forward to, you know, more partnerships, capacity building to see how we can improve and, you know, impact more on the continent. So I look forward to your questions, and yeah, thank you very much, Martin.
Thank you very much, Monique. This is a very inspiring and energetic story you're bringing, and your message that policies are great, but if you are not implementing them in a smart way, building on knowledge of the context that you're in, that you might hit the wrong things in working on it. So let's now go to the country representative of Côte d'Ivoire from GGGI, the Global Green Growth Institute, Ms. Olola Vieira.
Thankful for the organizer to join GGGI to this panel. Yes, next slide. So GGGI, just briefly, is a treaty-based organization created in 2012, and our main target is to support countries transition to green growth and low carbon transition. So basically making sure that within their policies, strategy, there is more green growth angles and green growth priority, as well as developing green growth model, right? In terms of structure, we are usually based within the government, as part of the government, and in Côte d'Ivoire, where I'm based, we are in part of the Ministry of Environment. So we are present in today 52 countries, and so basically we operate as an organization that supports implementations of NDCs, so non-determined contribution to UNFCCC, as well as SDGs engagement of countries. So those are part of our mandate. Our main partners include some of the organizations that spoke earlier, but also core members include the UK, Denmark, as well as Korea, and Norway. Please, next slide. Next slide. Again, next slide. Thank you. The slide before, please. I wanted to share today, as part of the conversation on green recovery and green growth, a report that GGGI has conducted in partnership with UNIDO and the Lund University, as well as IRENA in 2001. Basically, assess green jobs, renewable energy, and forestry investment for developing and emerging countries. From that studies, the key takeaways, we can go to next slide. The main key takeaways that we can take in terms of that study that has been aiming to assess the core benefits of implementing targets related to renewable energy and forestry in NDCs has been that in 27 of GGI member countries, the renewable energy potential for creating green jobs can reach 10 million up until 2030, right? Looking into geothermal potential, onshore wind, solar PV, biomass, as well as hydro. And so the study further details the different layers of potential for growth in the different subsectors, and definitely assess that energy sector is a potential. And I'd like to basically commend also the keynote speakers who have actually underlined the different potential for energy as well as other sectors. But our studies in the 27 member countries has demonstrated that if countries integrate in their NDC energy targets, there can be potential for creation of actually millions of jobs. In details, the studies demonstrate, for instance, focusing on Africa, that in the energy sector, among 5 countries, including 4 countries, including Burkina Faso, Ethiopia, Morocco, Rwanda, and Senegal. 700,000 jobs can be created in the energy sector, and the forestry sector, a bit more than a million, 680 to 2,361 jobs. So those are potentials that have been underlined and are key targets that countries have been willing to integrate then in their NDC's objectives. Next slide, please. Looking at the second focus of the study, which is the forestry sector, the study has demonstrated, has shown that 35 million jobs can be created per year by 35 million jobs here by 2030 can be created in different subsectors, such as management and conservation of protected areas in buffer zone, agroforestry, forest conservation, watershed improvement, and afforestation and reforestation, among others. This has been conducted in terms of assessment for 14 member countries, and that have been now quantifiable in the NDCs for forest targets, right? So in terms of priority, next slide, we can definitely understand that now transition to green economy is not an option anymore, as mentioned during this panel. And I'm fully also agreeing with the different discussion by the ILO representative and the AfDB representative on the different angles. So Africa needs to be more aggressive when it comes to focusing on green job creations. And the angle that I want to bring here is the support that we can provide to the private sector, who can play a clear role by fostering green growth and job creation, right? Because this is a new business line, a new business opportunity for the young generation, including women in the young generation, that needs to build capacity and need access to sound finance for investment in sectors such as green technology, low carbon, as well as agriculture, and so on. Next slide, please. So in terms of private sector role in this green growth transition, it is important that the private sector is put at the center and looks in terms of long-term green and inclusive growth, as well as put in place green business model and practice that have no negative impact on the profit margin, right? The private sector as well and can play a role by introducing an innovative approach with cleaner technologies in order to offset some of their and make sure that they don't offset their profitability, right? So taking advantage of innovative and rapid approach of the private sector to leapfrog with green technologies. Private sector can also bring in new ideas by partnering on the various areas of the supply chain and create economic opportunities, as well as incorporate social and environmental responsibilities. And more we see organization, including corporate social responsibility in their business practice, to encourage more green practice and green perspective in their portfolio. Next slide. In terms of support to the private sector, and I think we're speaking among experts here, what has been, there are a number of ways that the government can partner with the private sector, but GGGI also has experienced some of these process and supporting angles with the member countries by designing effective policies that can leverage private capital and know how to deliver effective instruments. to focus on inclusive growth and development at scale. Also, making sure that we increase the participation of private sector through PPPs in the green economy. So including and having the private sector at the table of all discussions to get the perspective as well, ahead of some of the discussions and policies discussions. Promoting and supporting green private sector development, raising awareness and set up private sector dialogue on green growth, what it means, how it can be articulated, how the different actors can build capacities. And this is the next point, by making sure that skills and knowledge of the private sector are used and are addressing the wide environmental issues. How we can support private sector as well is to make sure that investment is made in a holistic approach within national context, and as well bridging regional scale through partnership when possible. And coming from the Africa Climate Week, I think it's been encouraged moving towards the COP27 and the different engagement under the UNFCCC, that more regional connection needs to be made among actors, the private sector level as well as country level. Next slide, please. So looking more in terms of the different financing mechanism, I think, and this is, as GDGI, we have been also working with the different member countries to support on different financial instruments, pushing forward the different mechanisms such as green bonds, credit carbon, or debt for different nature swaps. And just to mention here that we've been working, for instance, with Peru in 2020 to issue approximately 4 billion worth of green bonds to generate capital for different projects and private sector projects as well. Looking into making sure that I think the representative from ILO was speaking about the different bankability of projects, how to make sure that, when a promoter needs to be supported, they are able to articulate bankable projects that can contribute to the objectives of the country, so that public and private finance can be generated to support their activities. Looking also at another angle.
Lola, can you round off your presentation, please?
Sure, getting to it. National financial vehicle as well have been an angle of support for the countries. So making sure that we are able to build funds and facilities for private capital. Next slide. So just briefly coming on to a tool that we are now looking to support the private sector on, is from voluntary to a voluntary market to ITMOs with the carbon trading. This is a new engagement for the UNFCCC, and it is a tool that we are aiming and that our member countries are already experiencing. Next slide. Also, in terms of building programs, in terms of green jobs and green entrepreneurship programs, we have been working with in the Pacific Island, Caribbean islands, and for instance in Rwanda, as well as in Senegal, to build on these green entrepreneurship programs. And in Cote d'Ivoire, where I'm based, we are initiating these activities where actually building with ILO partners here, we want to increase the potential for greening the portfolios of activities and greening investment for private sectors. Next slide. So mentioning briefly on the case of Cote d'Ivoire that I've been shedding all through the presentation, yes. My co-panelists from ILO mentioned the green job assessment model earlier. We've been on the ground here supporting as well in terms of assessment and capacity building. With the other angle of the COP15, we have also been working with the Youth and Ministry of Employment to develop the youth forum and collect facts and assessment on different measures to increase implication of youth generation in job creation. And again, as mentioned, we have been working on developing assessment for the Paris Agreement as a new tool for private sector to access new type of credit carbon for financing green projects. So I think in conclusion, this is, I'm nearing the end of the presentation, but basically, yes, several studies and reports have demonstrated that green growth is not anymore an aspect that should be ignored. It's definitely should be part of countries' engagement, as well as having private sector engage at the forefront of the discussion. Looking at the green economic recovery and coming from the COVID-19, this also is a tool for setting a new trend for green growth, and young generation should definitely look into it. And just to mention that GGI is just committed to support the transition to green economy in the different countries we're supporting, and mostly unleashing some of the green finance and partnership with different financial institutions. Thank you for your attention, and thank you, Martin, for the time.
Thank you, Olola, and apologies to the audience that I've not been managing the time well, but to be honest, it's always a little bit of a struggle with these presentations, because there's such a rich suite in narratives coming from the panelists, the keynote speakers, and we are trying to kind of bring everything into 2, 3, or 5 minutes, and that is a challenge. But notwithstanding the stories shared so far by all of the speakers, I think they show together that there's quite some joint understanding that the COVID crisis, though it is of course an awful crisis, is also creating good opportunities for green jobs and for green growth that will create more equal opportunities, will help to combat climate change and also create a nature positive economy. However, I've read the reflections and the questions asked. I've read the questions also asked, and 2 really stand out. I would like to invite our final speaker, Vanessa Ushi, from the AfDB, African Resource Centre Director, maybe to reflect on those 2 outstanding issues. One is that there is a need that local communities really take part in the action. The other element brought to the table is microfinance, the very important element of microfinance to ensure that the finance is there where it's needed most. So maybe Vanessa, in your closing remarks, can you please speak on those 2 events, two issues?
Thank you, and hello, Martin. Hello to our speakers and all the participants. So it's great to be here. I've been listening, and I've really enjoyed the very enriching discussions. So I have a prepared statement, and I'll try and weave in the elements you mentioned on communities and microfinance. So please just bear with me. Good afternoon to our distinguished participants, our partners, speakers, and panelists, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the African Development Bank and our partners for this event, I would like to sincerely appreciate the contributions and commitment you have all shown throughout today's webinar. Highlighting some key takeaways from the discussion. The transition to a nature-positive future requires concerted actions by governments, businesses, investors, academia, civil society, and multilateral development institutions. to create new policy tools, standards and metrics, financing mechanisms, knowledge, and capacity. African countries should pay more attention to valuing their natural capital assets and to integrating natural capital in national development plans and the national system of accounts. Africa's natural assets should be embedded in financial wealth. We can start by looking at accounting for ecosystem services in the agricultural sector, including food systems, to tap into quick wins. For example, valuing ecosystem services provided by soils by assessing soil quality can help in boosting food production and food security. As negotiations on the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework continue, this webinar has highlighted the need for renewed focus on Africa by governments, businesses, and the finance sector to support implementation of the Convention on Biological Diversity. Therefore, it is crucial that the post-2020 Biodiversity Framework considers how Africa's stock of natural assets can be used to leverage green finance through instruments such as debt for nature and climate swaps, green and blue bonds, and green microfinance tools for women and local communities. Given that nature-based solutions, resource efficiency, and biodiversity conservation are new topics in Africa, there's a need to coordinate efforts and incentivize key public and private sector actors to continue to generate data on nature and biodiversity, which supports policymaking, investment decisions, and infrastructure development. So let me quickly add here that we at the AfDB have started looking at green microfinance initiatives. I don't know if Sally Mata, my colleague, had a chance to talk about a program we are developing called Microgreen, which is exactly looking at how we can support entrepreneurs in some African countries to become, to have the skills and the resources necessary to participate in the green economy. So there are some examples that we can draw upon, which can further build on to develop microfinance tools for communities in the green transition. So in conclusion, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, climate change and biodiversity loss are two sides of the same coin. And for the greatest impact, we must all holistically tackle both global crises at the same time. Climate change has led countries to change their economic model towards more sustainable modes of production and consumption, which represents a gradual transition to a green economy. This green economy transition will create many new jobs around the world, including in Africa, and offers great opportunities to reduce gender inequalities in the region. As we heard in the panel discussion, a report by the AfDB and UN Women on green jobs for women in Africa, which was released in December of last year, found out that there are good opportunities for women in the nascent green economy, but there is a need for reforms to address underlying barriers facing women's participation, which range from access to finance, markets, and also reskilling and upskilling. Women play a critical role as stewards of Africa's natural capital in their communities and building the continent's climate resilience at the grassroots. All stakeholders should work towards linking environmental, climate change, and economic considerations in order to create development pathways for Africa that promote sustainable use of natural resources and its human capital to accelerate poverty reduction and spur economic prosperity. Ladies and gentlemen, let me conclude by expressing on behalf of the African Development Bank our appreciation to all our partners for this event, the African Union Commission and UNFCCC Regional Centre for Collaboration, our partners for the Natural Capital for African Development Finance Program, including the Green Growth Knowledge Partnership, GGKP, Worldwide Fund for Nature, WWF, and other partners, UN Environment, the International Institute for Sustainable Development, IISD, Economics for Nature, our funders, the Marvel Foundation, the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, BMZ,
and the German Agency for International Cooperation, GIZ. I also thank colleagues in the African Natural Resources Management and Investment Center, the Climate Change and Green Growth Departments of the bank, and other colleagues in IT, our media team, and of course, our interpreters who have helped facilitate the dialogue. So let's all join forces for a greener and nature positive future in Africa. Thank you. Mr. Moderator, back to you.
Thank you very much, Vanessa, for these nice words and closing remarks. Thanks to all of the speakers that have joined us today, as well as to the audience, of course. And last but not least, thanks to GGKP for organizing this wonderful session. As I said before, it's a wealth of experiences around natural capital, green growth, and COVID recovery. And it clearly shows that COVID recovery might be a crisis, but it's also an opportunity to improve green jobs and to improve also the gender balance and the equity in Africa. So thanks to all of you, and looking forward to meeting you in another place, maybe online, maybe face-to-face. Thank you.